이어서 CBN에서 보내온 소식 전해드립니다. 수년 전부터 중국 정부의 가정교회 탄압은 극심한 것으로 알려져 왔습니다. 코로나19 팬데믹 기간 동안 상황은 더 악화됐지만 중국 교회의 지도자들은 쉬지 않고 복음을 전하고 있습니다. 지난 2020년에는 중국으로 온라인 설교가 송출된 일도 있었다고 하는데요. 이 설교 내용이 책으로 출판됐습니다. 설교를 엮어 출판한 한나 네이션 씨의 이야기 들어봤습니다.
So in early 2020, there was a conference of Asian believers that took place in Malaysia. There was a large delegation from the Chinese house churches. And unfortunately, as it happened, the conference coincided with the Wuhan lockdown and the outbreak of the COVID-19 pandemic. And a lot of the Chinese couldn't leave China as a result. And so they decided to live stream this conference into China, which was involved a significant risk for many. But there were tens of thousands of viewers who watched. And so after the conference concluded, they decided to continue doing public live stream evangelistic preaching. They felt like pandemic was an important time for evangelism. And so groups of pastors preached openly, publicly throughout 2020, calling people to Jesus in the midst of the pandemic. And the content from this book was developed from those sermons. So it's a message of hopefulness for those who are experiencing suffering. The motto that these pastors carried with them throughout this preaching was "Let the light shine in the darkness." And I think that motto really comes out in the book.
한나 네이션 씨는 책의 내용과 함께 중국 교회의 상황을 전했습니다.
I know many of the pastors who are represented in the book. They are themselves experiencing harassment. So, I mean, just even their willingness to look beyond themselves to the needs of their communities and the needs of their neighbors to hear about Jesus at risk to themselves is a powerful testimony. One pastor reflects on the experience of losing a child. Another pastor reflects on the experience of bitter fights with his wife. And so they're very relatable, even though these stories come from China, which might feel very far away. They're very human. The church in China has grown just massively in the last 80 years. Conservative estimates are that there are 70 to 80 million Christians in China today. Since 1950, that's about a 60-fold growth in Christians in China. So obviously there's been massive revival. And I think for me, one of the big takeaways is that this is a church without power. This is a church on the cultural margins. And yet they are seeing this significant revival. So I think for us, it's a word of encouragement to us that we don't need to be afraid of what lies ahead in our own countries. We don't need to fear cultural attack or cultural marginalization because Christ is with his church.
끝으로 네이션 씨는 3년째 수감 중인 왕이 목사의 소식을 전했습니다.
It's not easy to find a lot of information about him. We believe that he is well. We anticipate the day that he's released. The Center for House Church Theology will be publishing a book of his writings later this year around the anniversary of his arrest so that they can not only know the story of his arrest and the persecution of early rain, but understand his motivations and what he believes about God.